All right, all right. We are live, MythVision podcast. I hope everybody's doing okay. You can hear me clearly. Figure I'd jump on here live. Just got back from the gym, and I try to make that a routine now to keep my mental health good and my body good, especially post COVID. I had a little bit of a almost like a beer belly going, and it was really from like Slim Jims and Dollar Tree candy, just sitting there watching shows and stuff when we all went through that stage of hibernation from COVID. And now I'm of course trying to take good care of myself and it's a routine. It's really something I encourage everybody to try and do, even though you don't want to do it. Do it. Trust me. Get used to it. Um, I figure let's talk is generic enough because there are so many things we could talk about. Upcoming stuff that I've recently been doing, projects I'm working on currently, projects that have already been accomplished, which are only on Patreon, courses I have planned for the future, live streams that I'm going to be doing with academics, and of course, continuing to play into the online polemic anti apologetics stuff that you see on the internet. And I kind of want to lay out up front my heart, my who I am as a person. In reality, many of these titles, they're sensational, they're purposeful. I do it because that's what gets people to click. But once you click, you can see that I'm attempting to make a meaningful and deep observation on the material that's being discussed and not just surface level shenanigans that you might hear in a lot of different circles. I'm attempting to be as accurate as I think is truthful with the material. And what I find interesting, I I saw someone post this. You might relate to me on this. There is a sin of certainty that people have. And when you get into real critical thinking, critical scholarship, especially when you're dealing with history, which is probabilistic, it's based on probabilities and it's speculative in many ways based on data that you might observe archaeologically, textually, the list can go on. And we have other tools that we use, methods that we use in order to try and ascertain, did this happen, did this not? The list can go on. We try to be fair. We try to be equally fair in those observations when we're doing it on Homeric studies, biblical studies, New Testament studies, you name it. This is what we're trying to do. And I find that the reason I have such an axe to grind with apologetics isn't because they believe in God. I want to say this very clear up front. I have nothing against people who believe in a God or believe that God exists or anything like that. I have my personal take that I'm not persuaded, I'm not convinced. And I think that many of the ideas about God lead in a self delusional way to harmful activities to oneself and in the world. I don't want that to be what I'm interpreted as from everyone out there. I understand I get categorized that way because, unlike many people who don't tell their particular ontology, I have no interest in kind of hiding that or even you can pigeonhole me. Go ahead and poison the well if you'd like. I don't care. Um, what my goal is to show this certainty, this confidence, and the special pleading that takes place on behalf of those who hold to something sacred. For example, my recent video that I did yesterday, where I had the log coming out of David Wood's eye. I actually enjoy many of the videos where David Wood is critical toward Islam. And in fact, the recent video I was picking apart, I personally don't know the textual criticism side of whether or not they inserted the name Muhammad in order to create a later legend to dominate Jewish and Christian people here at the shrine, the Dome of the Rock. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting observation. And if it is true, that's awesome. That's a really cool observation that David makes. I just wanted to point out how everything he said literally applies to Christianity and the biblical texts that we read. And critical scholars have been doing this for centuries now on the Bible. I want to encourage people to be critical of Islam more and more, of course. But if we're going to do it, we should be consistent, I think, and being fair. And I just don't think my team's correct when it's easily, blatantly obvious that you have the same problems, if not even more, in many cases, with your own position. And then, you go out there. I could see something like a conversation happening with me and David, and it trying to spin onto, well, what's your position? What is your worldview? And I'm not the one who's making the claim. I know many Christians who actually do textual criticism on the Bible and will point out flaws. In fact, I pulled one off the shelf of one of the leading New Testament scholars in the world right now, Del C. Allison Jr., whom I admire and appreciate, and he is a Christian. But he does his best to be fair, to be not certain, because he knows that you can't be certain. This is a faith thing that people are jumping to the conclusion, and he thinks the personal experience is something that is necessary to persuade one. It should be that. I mean, the historical evidence, he said, would not persuade him alone, and he's being fair. So I want to get that off my chest up front, because I think almost everybody in my family is Christian, and I love them. I spend time with them almost every day. I'm speaking of my mom, my dad, my brother, my sisters, like everybody that I talk to, that I engage with on a daily basis, they're Christians. And I don't talk about these things around them often because they don't want to. And when the conversations have come up, I share my perspective in a way that I think is gentle enough, that isn't offensive. They understand my position. I understand where they're coming from, and they know that, well, Derek's done a deep dive that I don't think I'll ever do with my own religion. They admit, I don't think I'll ever have an interest on even trying to peel back the curtains of my own religion. I'm totally fine with Jesus on Sunday and love my neighbor and great message. Thank you for telling me to love my spouse and do the next right thing. Self-help kind of Christianity that works for them. And I don't want to take that away from them. In fact, I'll word it another way back to David Wood. If David Wood literally is being absolutely honest by saying, if Christianity's false, I will go out there murdering people, as he said in debates and stuff, then I hope he is convinced that Christianity is true for his own and the people who potentially could be endangered. I hope he believes that it's true. If that's what it takes, I don't think that's an honest reality, but nonetheless, if that's what he needs to not murder, okay, then believe what you got to believe. I don't want to take that away from you. I want the viewers who are being persuaded by his kind of rhetoric to also understand that the same applies for his own worldview, Christianity. And you can poke holes at my worldview all you want. I'm not in a tribe. I don't feel that I'm part of a tribe. I think there's so many variations of skeptics that are out there, and I try not to be as tribalistic as I possibly can, even though when it comes to critical thinking and critical scholarship, there tends to be grooves that are set out based on the evidence and arguments that are in the field. And they don't all agree on data, but there seems to be general consensus on certain ideas that they do tend to agree on. And I like to even test those. Now, I don't jump to, oh, God breathed. No, I test them as in, are there other hypotheses using a historical critical method, which just assumes naturalism in its observations. It doesn't jump to the miraculous. I tend to think the reason they do that, and this is my personal observation, is genre. Oftentimes there's clearly a genre observation where something fits folktale, fiction, myth, legend. If you're interested in that and wanting to see that in Homer's Odyssey and the ancient Near East, Bruce Loudon's book, I'm rereading it again, and man, too bad he's dead. He died a few years back from cancer. I would be flying out to interview him if he would have me. This guy blows the lid off. He's observing genre, and the best way I've said this with that whole, it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, when I'm engaging with apologists and they go, that's like false equivocation. Just because it's that doesn't draw the conclusion that it's false or anything like that. And I get that. You can't prove it didn't happen. Uh, but you have really good reason to be skeptical that it did. And you could apply the same method to any of the other claims that are being said of the other figures, like Heracles in the Greek, um, Asclepius, Isis, the Isis cult in the Roman Empire. They healed the blind, raised the dead, the deaf, the cripple, the lame, the whole nine, just like Jesus. As Vespasian healed the blind and the withered hand, in the writings of some of the Roman historians, and I think there's three sources that say that he did that. I don't think Vespasian actually did that, but I could see a Christian trying to go, well, they thought it did happen or something, to try and give it historical value so that they can apply that to Jesus' miracles as well. I tend to think this is legend about the Caesars. And anyway, in that book, he shows you how to categorize, and it's not just him, he's sourcing several critical scholars, biblical material that is clearly the genre of myth. And once you see that genre category and you see it in the New Testament with like strangers visiting, that, this very, what is it, theoxany? I think it's a theoxany myth. You find this in Luke with the road to Emmaus narrative. Jesus is walking with them, they don't even know it's him. This is similar to what you see with Abraham, or even the Lot story, where the angels come and they don't know that they're entertaining angels. They don't know that these men who are sitting there trying to rush these angels don't even know who these strangers are. And the theoxany myth is in Ovid's Metamorphosis, we find Ovid's Fasti. There's myths there. Once you see the genre, you can start to see connections in that genre. You don't necessarily need to apply genetic connection, but you can see its story. It isn't history. You can apply that. And once I see it enough, it's like, okay, well, you can understand why the obvious observation by me and critical thinkers and scholars is that it walks like a duck, talks like a duck. You can't, I mean, I don't see why that doesn't seem the most persuasive conclusion, other than psychology, which is why I get accused by many of the faithful for psychoanalyzing the believer, because I know the psychology from my experience is extremely detrimental to my conclusion. I cannot conclude that this is false. My experience told me otherwise. My emotional investment into this religion would not allow me. I can't falsify that experience I had when I came to the altar, accepting a heavenly Father who could forgive me of any past deed, any future deed I've ever done, and who will never let me down. I mean, there's so much depth to that psychology there. I can't help. It's the dangling fruit in the eye of Adam for me and Eve. I want to eat it because it's got to be something going on there. And I'm sure psychoanalyzing can happen to harmed ex-Christians, harmed ex-Muslims. The list can go on, but I can't help but feel tempted to do it, and I try not to. But I think there's huge factors in that, because if we were to approach Homer the same way they're approaching New Testament studies or any of these other things, they would not bat an eye when they find embarrassing elements of Odysseus. I saw a recent live stream or a video that's being set up by my friend, Christian apologist at Testify, Eric Manning, where he's talking about embarrassing elements of King David proves his historicity. Well, damn it, if I open the Odyssey and show you what Odysseus goes through and the things he does, where he's on his journey and he's also having sex with other women, and he loves his wife Penelope, and he's struggling with these kind of these human aspects that we all kind of deal with in our lives. This kind of makes the verisimilitude and the reality of Odysseus true in the Odyssey. I got a I got a call coming in here. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, I've that was a long rant. Forgive me if I have, totally ignored the comment section, but there's so much to unburden myself and to speak freely about what I'm going through. And This is like therapy for me. For anybody who doesn't know, sometimes you got to talk to someone. Anyway, let me just address this heretic in the chat. So, since we're all part of the MythVision cult, I asked that everybody crucify this man. If it's Josh, will you finally denounce doctors Kipp and Josh? I feel like I'm in front of the Catholic and the institutes where Martin Luther was. My conscience and scripture does not allow me to do this. I cannot, in good faith, denounce my dear friends, Doctors Kipp and Josh, because I know their hearts and I know they're great people and I know they mean well and they're trying to do what I'm doing. So, whoever you are, you can't be Doctors Kipp or Josh. Um, you can shove it. You can shove it. No. Anyway, thank you for the super chat, Josh. Appreciate the love, my friend. We got Garfield in here. Garfield, talking about put on the shirt. Look, man, I just got from the gym, bro. I just got back from the gym. I can't denounce them. That's blasphemy of the Holy MythVision. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Oh, someone's brought up David Wood, like the clown. Look, I'd love to talk with the guy. I'd just be in an interesting experiment. Everyone who watches MythVision knows I'm not into debates myself. I'm not a debater. In fact, there are people rhetorically and skilled with debating far better than I imagine I am because I have no practice or experience with debates. But I like human contact and communication and having conversations that I think are meaningful, trying to have honest, fair, real conversations, not a just gotcha. I want to explain where I'm coming from, why I conclude what I do, and then hear them out and hear what they have to say. That's my goal. And I don't know. I texted him this morning. I don't know if he'll want to have that kind of conversation with me. I don't know if it matters. He's got mainly just an anti-Islamic, anti-Islam angle, and a lot of it applies to Christianity. You could point out some maybe modern factors in terms of some of the extremism that you may see in the world that is far worse than maybe what Christians are practicing at the moment. But go back a few centuries, and you might see some very interesting patterns that we find within Christianity. And so I appreciate trying to hold the feet of Islam to modernity and trying to get it to conform. But guess what? I'm not the only one. We're ignoring the voices of many Muslims who also want to do that. So while I'm not a Muslim, and you all know I don't think Muhammad is a prophet, you all know, and I plan on doing documentaries to show mythology in the Quran, which, some might think that falsifies it, more fundamentalist types. Others, like my friend Javad Hashmi, PhD at Harvard, he's a Muslim scholar. He actually admits there's mythology in the Quran. Well, that kind of person I want to give credit to and want to advance, even if I don't draw their conclusions. I want people like that to be the voice in their communities because most Muslims aren't going to listen to this guy. Most Muslims obviously may not listen to David Wood. Most Muslims are going to listen to a Muslim. And so that's my goal. Damn, I did it again. I literally just unburdened again, didn't I? Are you all feeling the presence right now of the MythVision spirit? I feel it. The presence is there, strong. Teasing. Hey, everybody. I'm trying to go back up to the top. There's been quite a few who've chat already, sent comments. Welcome, everybody. Jackie, Nitty, James Apperson, Keanu Reeves. We know that's the real Keanu who tunes into us, of course. Caterpillar, Dr. Kipp Davis, George, is it Jordy? Jordy? I'm just scrolling down here. Uric, Chris, obviously Garfield, Steve from Yellowstone, Dr. Cheryl. I'm trying to get Baron, Deos, forgive me, Duckman, Tetragrammaton. You guys know I'm the worst for pronouncing stuff. I even leave some of that stuff in my documentaries, and I catch a lot of crap. If you want us to take you seriously, you should learn how to pronounce everything meticulously. No, I'm not a grammar Nazi. I'm just trying to tell you we can't take you serious. And it's like, dude, I'm not the guy who came up with these ideas. Go fact check them. I'm just trying to put information out there. Sorry that I'm not impeccable and perfect. But you might ask my wife. No, she won't say I'm perfect either. Uh, is it Juanita GC? I probably butchered the name. Thank you for becoming a member. I really appreciate that. It always means a lot to have support and creating a community of people who help us keep bringing what I think is fair and as accurate as we're going to get information as we assess these ancient stories, text, history, myths, legends, folklore. Man, I want to get into the Odyssey. I want to get into ancient Hittite mythology. I want to get into ancient Mesopotamian stuff. I want to expand our horizons and show that the same applicability that people who are in critical scholarship are also doing all of this in all of these other fields. And so we can actually start broadening our perspective beyond just the Bible and realize, oh, you mean to tell me there were these claims about these figures back there? Well, why don't we believe them? Critical scholars cut through that stuff like a hot knife through butter. They don't waste their time thinking if Hammurabi legitimately got divine laws from the god Shamash, the sun god, and that these are really divine revelations given to Hammurabi from Shamash. That these kings actually were divinely born by the gods themselves, and the list goes on and on. No, but we do with Jesus, don't we? The LOL bit. I'm Eric. My 10-year-old hijacked my profile. Laugh out loud, but would love a show on different church fathers, such as Lutheran or John Calvin. That would be an interesting thing to peel back from a skeptical point of view. I know a little bit about how much the hate towards Jews was in a lot of their rhetoric and what they wrote, but coming from that kind of Protestant tradition that I did, be interesting to reevaluate it from I no longer believe this stuff perspectives. Thank you so much for the super chat. I don't blame you. My kids take my phone sometimes and want to play games, and I wonder what they're loading, downloading, changing. You never know. Neil, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate that, Mr. Conway. Appreciate the membership and supporting the channel. Anyone who has that member symbol, you can see it right next to the name. Their names are written in the MythVision Book of Life. They cannot be erased, unlike the Book of Revelation, which talks about blotting stuff out. If you change words, you can't. It's once saved, always saved. Clearly, the stamp proves that. So, thank you for everybody who's a member. I'm looking to make sure I don't miss things here as I go forward as much as possible. Nate S says Derek's new channel discussing religious scholarship while working out. I'd look like a nut job. Can you imagine being in like a Planet Fitness, sitting there going, and then he had an apotheosis. Gypsy Daisy, I became curious, went searching, and came out the other side without my faith. Seriously, thank you, Derek. Never been more at peace. Interesting. I think it's interesting to find contentness in not having all the answers, being comfortable human. Like, I was just reading, who was it I was reading to yesterday? I was explaining, where's my phone at? I don't know why I get all meticulous about details and wanting to be at like this person. My buddy Umar. I was talking to him in light of the David Wood stuff, and I needed a source, and he's pretty good at finding some sources that showed that Muslims hired Christian architects. Whoop-de-doo, to build the shrine we see on the Temple Mount today. And we talked, and I was explaining Christianity and what Ignatius says in his letter to the Romans. some of the titles, like he says, I want to die. Like these chapters where he's writing his letter, he literally expresses, I want to die so that I can attain to God. I need this flesh to be over to attain to God and to be a true disciple of Christ, to take up my cross and follow him. That's his interpretation of Christianity. He hates the flesh. He hopes he's food ground in the teeth of the beast. And he describes the beast being 10 soldiers who have him imprisoned. And if they won't kill me, he says, I will entice them and make them do so. This is nuts. This is crazy. So I was explaining that you get hints of this in Paul with this like detestable flesh that we're in. It feels very good to me to not hate my flesh now. Like psychologically, that is something that I feel. And just one comment on this. I didn't want to dwell on this because I'm hoping this gets fixed, but I think it was Rob from Sentinel Apologetics made a recent community post. Drama's in the air right now, accusing, I believe it's Dan McClellan and Kipp Davis of defending Stavrakopoulos, and anti-Semitism gets thrown up because Stavrakopoulos sees things that are ancient Near Eastern concepts in the Bible that is ubiquitous in Egyptian mythology, Mesopotamian mythology, Phoenician and Canaanite mythology with Adu Garrett. The list goes on. To give you an example, and I'm trying not to be too explicit, but the gods bone the ground, bone each other. I'm using the word bone to say sex. There is so much sexual language in creation, in death, in procreating, in everything that is all throughout this. And she sees hints of it in the Bible. And so I think anti-Semitism got brought up, and I'm like, well, if we observe things that are in the ancient Near East like that, if that observation is being seen in the Bible viewed of God, would that be something is like hateful toward Jewish people? I understand that most Jews do not interpret these texts that way, or Christians may not interpret these texts that way. I understand that. But what observations do we see with the text that might give that kind of interpretation? Where's the hate in that? If we're accurately trying to look at this comparative. So I hope that the whole drama ends because I think that's a totally inaccurate assessment of what critical scholars are doing here. Though not defending Robyn this, historically many critical scholars, especially in Germany, have been anti-Semites and may have been motivated in their reasoning in many cases to draw conclusions. I know that's not Kipp and I know that's not Dan. I know that. So I think that the drama needs to end yesterday. Apostate Aladdin in the hizzy. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about any religion? The most surprising? The most surprising thing I've learned. I I don't that's a like what's your favorite song on planet Earth? There's so many songs that I like in different genres and stuff. It's super hard to nail that one down. I think what really interests me as far as what I've learned is that thumbprint of humanity, seeing how human they all are, not needing magic to explain them. They all are explainable without the magic. That to me has been one of the surprising conclusions. The other surprising conclusion I would say is the further back you get, the more sexual many of these mythologies are explicit, which tells me a phobia develops within these religions. I would maybe say sometime after Plato, when flesh and sexuality, we're looking at asceticism. We shouldn't do those things. That's nasty. That's bad. And the ancients didn't give a hoot. They let it all hang out and they flexed it in their mythologies. So, what happened to us to be so resistant and allergic to what is so normal and natural? To me, that's surprising that we kind of have become extremely allergic to what is completely normal. And of course, I don't have all that figured out myself, but you see it in society, the way women are treated in many ways. That has been quite surprising as well, to watch how women were treated, have been treated in these texts. And then even today, remnants, fossils that are still alive of an idea that needs to die out on how women are observed and treated in society. That is surprising to me. And anyway, it the reason is I'm a dude, right? I'm just throwing it out there. I'm a dude who just doesn't see that, never saw that my whole life. And then when I started to really empathize, putting on the shoes of other people, trying to understand, then I started going, "Oh my gosh, the the people who've been treated the worst throughout all of history have been women." And that really just blew my mind, uh how bad, and how, they just been along for the ride. We've been behind the steering wheel, really wrecking the car, bumping into everything. And, you know, I wonder what it would be like to just, switch seats for a minute. Anyway, I had to catch you. I saw you here. So I had to, shout you out. Thanks for the question. Callan Radu, thank you for the super sticker. And you see that eternal salvation stamp? They're in the book and they ain't going nowhere. Thank you so much for the love. Thanks for the super sticker. I don't know. Let me see if I can find if you had a comment, Callan. I don't want to leave you hanging in case you did. I don't see one. I do not see one. So I just want to make sure. I don't want to leave anybody hanging here. Um, did I already get your name? I don't know. Oh my gosh, who is this guy? Gnostic informant Derek of Macedon. Inside joke. Every time, almost every time that Neil ever private messages me, he has like this, like, Derek the Gnostic, Derek the Macedonian, Derek King of Persia. Like, he always jokes with like some Derek of, and I always like call him like Neilalitis or something. We joke around. Of course, Romulus and Osiris did not rise. Those sources don't count. Only the Gospels count. Don't you know this is a proven fact? I'm glad you're here to set the record straight, Neil. I just, I didn't realize that. But let me open up the book and read the fine print real quick here. Make sure you special plead the Gospels and do not allow any other myth or claim of any other religious views be true other than our particular one of Jesus. And if anyone tries to show any type of heuristic or comparison between Jesus and other figures, just shout them out and shut them up. Oh, okay. Hey, Neil, you're right, man. It's a fact that this one's true and all of them are wrong. The small print said so. So thanks a lot for the super chat, man. I love you. I know now who to follow and believe. So thank you so much for the super chat. Oh, while your super chat's here, and I hope everybody subscribes to your channel, you have a documentary coming out, and it's going to be primary source after primary source. So you can make your mind up looking at some of this really interesting stuff pertaining to the New Testament and various other gods. So be on the lookout for Gnostic Informant. Transformational Coach. I like that name. Thanks for your videos. Very helpful. As a deconverting conservative Baptist, is there a specific book, channel you would recommend for help? Interesting. Um, it depends on what you're looking for when you say help. Some people need to actually talk to a professional about how it's affected them, the kind of trauma they may have experienced psychologically due to the religion, or even the kind of issues that may be involved in the fact that they are involved in a Christian community and they're no longer believing what the tribe believes. So how do we navigate the world we live in that's real around us every day, and yet not necessarily draw the conclusions that we think this might be literally true? There are various conclusions that some might need to take. We had a pastor call in when I was on Ichapod, Brady Goodwin. He's the ex-Christian rapper who we had a caller who was a pastor, and he doesn't believe, he has these doubts, but he's a pastor leading a church who did not want to be named, asking for advice. And he wants to be accurate though, and he struggles because this is everything that provides for his family. And I go the harm reduction route. I don't think all or nothing needs to be the answer. Don't do it like me. In fact, to give you a little inside history, this may be too much for some of you, but I don't care. I think it's necessary. I'm a recovering drug addict. And the way I withdrawed off heroin years back, almost 9 years now, is cold turkey. I don't recommend you sit on your couch and suffer at home for weeks getting off of heroin. I think you need professional help and try to go that route because you could die doing the wrong things. And if you end up relapsing and overdosing because your tolerance is down, anyway, you get the point. Well, I don't think all or nothing necessarily needs to be the case for deconversion or people who are going through this. So I found meaning in the text in a different way. I enjoyed Manly P. Hall, which is a 1930s. He's a Freemason, and he found ways to allegorically interpret much of the Hebrew scriptures in Old Testament, New Testament stuff, which may not even be accurate. But it was really interesting to see how he renegotiated these texts, applying them to celestial bodies, because we know that celestial bodies were significant to ancient people. I don't know what path you might need to take in that respect, but there's tons of channels that are doing alternative interpretations on the Bible rather than trying to hold it up as history in every situation. And I encourage those, whatever conclusion those people draw in terms of their ontology. It's just trying to get away from that, the fangs of literalist fundamentalism, that I think will be helpful. I don't really know the answer to your question. Everybody's a bit different, but I would say it doesn't hurt to get professional help if you have a counselor or someone you can talk to that you can unburden. I'm pretty transparent. I lay all my dirty laundry out here on you guys, and it makes me feel better just to have these conversations with you and saying what's on my chest. But some people need to make a YouTube channel. If you ask any ex-Muslim, ex-Christian, whoever they are, and they feel like they can go public, it is therapeutic, believe it or not, to just speak what you think and to be able to do that with a community that supports you and is cheering you on and says, "Hey, you're not alone in that. I think that way too." That's another method that helped me get clean off drugs, and it's helped me in my process of navigating life as a non-Christian today. Uh-oh, we have a new member to the cult, of course. Thor 3:16. If you haven't read that verse, you really, really should. Thor loved the world so much that he gave. Anyway, I don't want to give you the whole spiel. You'll have to find it when you become an initiate. Thank you for becoming a member. I really appreciate the support. It means a lot. Thank you, Thor. Scott Rutherford, heard of a book called the Oahspe? I have not. Let me look it up. Oahspe, a new Bible. Let me share the screen for a second to show you what I'm looking at here. So, Oahspe, a new Bible, was published in 1882, purporting to contain new revelations from the ambassadors of the angel host of heaven, prepared and revealed unto man in the name of Jehovah. It was produced by an American dentist, John Ballow Newbrough, 1828 to 1891, who reported to have been written by automatic writing, making it one of a number of 19th century spiritualist works attributed to that practice. The text defines adherents of the disciplines expounded in Oahspe as faithists. New Bible in the words of Jehovah and his angel. And you know what interests me is like the spelling. How many people get angry on how you spell Jehovah or Yahweh, and the ancient inscriptions have Yahoo, abbreviated letters. Like, come on, guys. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. It sounds like kind of like Shakers type of spiritualist type of thing, but interesting nonetheless. I've never heard of it till now. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Scott. I appreciate that. Um, oh, Satan's in the house. Holy smokes. Thank you, Satan's guide. Tithing for the man, the myth vision, Derek Lambert. Well, thank you so much, Satan. I never thought I'd thank Satan for for giving me tithes. What are the odds? There's going to be some literalists, some people who really do think there's stuff going on that are going to watch this right now, and they're going to. I know what I would have thought like 10 years ago. Um, if you haven't seen the documentary, you're going to hell. That's because we love you. We're trying to keep you from going to hell. So you need to watch the documentary. You get the point. But seriously, I was in contact with the man behind the curtain, Satan, about this documentary before he launched it. And I actually helped him in terms of connecting him with other YouTube figures and give him a little bit of tips here and there on what I would do on YouTube. And I'm very proud that the success of that documentary has taken off like it has and caught the attention of many who are clearly triggered by what showed up in that documentary. And this stuff was like 101 basic critical scholarship you might learn about New Testament, Old Testament, and academics are all throughout the documentary. John Collins, Ronald Hendel, Hector Avalos, which I wish was still alive. I would have loved to have interviewed the guy. He was a soft spirit, soft soul, soft person. And he wrote me the like month before he died that I can't even talk anymore. The cancer's consumed me. I wish I could have been part of your journey, but I'm going to be dead before long. And that's such a disappointing email coming from him. Something to that effect. I could pull up the email and dig into my 4-year-old email and see. But I hope it reaches 10 million, 20 million. More people need to see because the way you navigate that documentary is just brilliant. It's so brilliant. It created Diablo Critics, which is this ongoing series of a group of scholars on Kipp Davis's YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, you really should. And they're talking about Mike Winger, various apologists, and how they are reacting to what the scholars are saying in the field about these things. And it's really interesting to hear. One of the fun observations on that, this is a plug for Diablo Critics, is Matthew Munger saying how scholars don't always need to take the same tack when they're looking at the Bible. Some scholars just say, okay, what is the final form of the Hebrew scriptures? We get that there's so many ways to understand various sources, contradicting sources, problems in the text, but how do I engage with the Bible in its final form as a critical scholar? And they choose that path. That was an interesting one from the last episode. I like what Munger said there because is it von Wim Vasilius? Anyway, he thinks in the final form we have the Bible that the authors have compiled it and are inspired by Herodotus's histories. Yes, none of this is provable in the absolute sense, but the observation is something that should be at least considered, being that you have 9 major books in the biblical account from Genesis to Kings, and there are 9 books in Herodotus's histories, and he parallels a lot of the interesting overlaps between the two. Went down a deep rabbit hole there, but thank you, Satan. Thank you so much. Guitar Dog in the hizzy. Love the name, always have, and I appreciate you having a dog in the image. Hey, man, been watching your channel for a long time. I know. I remember your name and the picture. Excellent work. Loved your recent interview with Dr. Cargill. Well, thank you so much, Guitar Dog. I appreciate that. And I hope to do another one so I could tease everybody here. I want to do a response, a critical response, maybe tone down some of the rhetoric. I don't know. I think it's fun sometimes because I see it happens in like David Wood's, jabbing at Islam and stuff. Fables in the Quran. Muslim scholars admit the shocking truth. This is on his Act 17 polemics. And I want to do a video with Dr. Richard C. Miller who literally wrote, I'm gonna come back to you in just a second here. I got to come back to my screen, stop sharing, but I want to respond to that video and I want to show you a scholar. By the way, there are many scholars who also agree with what he's saying. He just capitalizes on the fact that the New Testament Gospels are loaded with fables. Wouldn't you know it? So you're dealing with fables in your own worldview, but let's ignore that and point out how the Quran has fables. Why don't we just say, okay, those have fables, we have fables over here, and there's a that's I want to pretty much do that, but I want to do it in a smart way and educate people to show Christianity, Judaism, fables, just like the Quran would have fables as well. And anyway, thank you for that compliment. I didn't know how I wanted to navigate that one, especially when I knew there was going to be a bunch of triggered Christians coming in and telling me how wrong I am or that I don't understand. In fact, I had some take me to task saying Christians don't ever claim Old Testament figures are Christians. And I'm thinking to myself, these Christians who are Trinitarians, first of all, would admit Jesus is part of the Godhead, and they think he's shown up in some type of theophanies in the Old Testament. They think he is who Moses wrote about, according to the Gospel of John. Jesus says to the Pharisees, Moses, you say you believe in Moses, but Moses spoke about me. He wrote about me. And looking at like 1 Corinthians 10 with the rock that was in the wilderness that followed the ancient Israelites in the Exodus, that rock was Christ. That Christians anachronistically have made these people into Christ followers in many cases. So much so that that same person tried to accuse me of making up nonsense, saying that Plato nor Aristotle were actually Christians and therefore, we're not actually believers. Justin Martyr literally says Aristotle and Plato are in heaven because the Logos revealed itself to them centuries before. How do they not say that they're Christians? Just like Muslims anachronistically want to fit these heroes, including Jesus, into the category of their particular, brand of Abrahamic faith. And I'm just pointing out that seems that both of them are doing this. Okay, enough of that one. Imnag in the house. Genesis really throws women under the bus. I would say, especially with the fact that you're looking at the woman as the one who fell gullible to eating first, according to the Genesis account. It's pretty common that you find this stuff in ancient texts. But what Augustine, and even some of the New Testament letters that are written in the name of Paul, like first, or I think it is, or Second Timothy, First Timothy, a woman should remain silent and have her man teach her everything, shut her mouth in church, that kind of thing, and that childbearing will get them salvation because the woman ate and sinned. Like it puts all the blame on women. The way it gets interpreted, at least, is absolutely horrific for women, and throughout history. I can't imagine how many private in-house arguments that have occurred in the relationship between husband and wife where the man literally throws this up. I cannot imagine how many. I'd be a billionaire or trillionaire for every man who's used this myth against their spouse. I would probably be a billionaire or trillionaire, literally. So thanks for the observation. But I imagine there's so many more. In fact, I made an observation when I was helped by Dr. Kipp in a documentary. Kipp pointed out an interesting observation between Genesis 38 and what we find with King David. There's linguistic parallels between the names of Judah's sons. And that's that story where he ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law and the one son ends up dying because he spills his seed on the ground, on the earth. God smites him. Well, in this documentary, I open it up at the beginning just to show you in Genesis, one after another weird sexual observation that takes place from seeing Noah's nakedness to Lot sleeping with his two daughters to Judah, sleeping with his daughter-in-law who's a prostitute or at least pretending to be one. Like there's a ton of wild, kinky stuff in Genesis if anyone takes the time to notice it. Anyway, Michael Bell, thank you for the super chat. Recovering from Religion Foundation could help. Good resource for our friend who asked for any sources that could help them in their deconversion earlier. I absolutely recommend checking them out. I've heard a lot of good stories from people who participated in that. They've even had volunteers. It might be helpful to participate in that, but you can give them a call. I think it's free. They have a telephone number you can call into. But thank you. Thank you. MNAG again, thank you for the super chat. Kipp Davis put me on check. Genesis really throws women to the snakes. Interesting. I'm sure there's several other observations in Genesis that we can look to on women being bad. Look at Potiphar's wife. She just so attracted to how often does that freaking happen? Sorry, the dude in me is coming out, but like, how many times in history in your life do you like find someone who's like dead head over heels for you that they're like trying to take advantage of you? Meaning the female's doing that. It doesn't happen often. I imagine it happens, but it's just like, come on, his wife is the bad person here, and the righteous one, Joseph. So we could probably find several examples. Darren Lemon, thank you for the super chat. Just subscribed. Really like your channel. Do you know the reason Noria in Gnostic text burned the ark 3 times? The 3 times always confused me. Thanks. I do not, and I'm not aware of this particular text, and never heard of that. If there's anyone in the chat, because our audience is pretty well read and sophisticated. They've read things I haven't. If you've read or you have any possible observations on this super chat, and you're aware of the text, please answer Darren's super chat. I'm interested to hear what people have to say, especially if they know this. I almost want to hit Neil up for a call a friend who wants to be a millionaire and say, hey, so do you know about this text, the ark 3 times? But I really don't want to make any even guesses without knowing the material. Hard work. Thank you for the super chat. Love the name. Derek got back from On the Gym, where he clearly read from the Swoley book. Thank you. Appreciate that. I don't know about being swole, but trying to be in shape, at least trying to take better care of my health. Melly, thank you for the super chat. Of all the ancient gods you've learned about so far, which do you find most interesting? Thanks for all you do. And that's again, like for me right now, that's like, what's your favorite song? What is your favorite food? I have tops, but I don't know if I have like the one. For me, I would say for me, I'm very interested in Hercules. I like hearing about this hero figure. I like to study about Asclepius, this healing god, and maybe going deeper into the roots of how the Greeks took ancient Near Eastern concepts. They're not all Proto-Indo-European mythologies, and borrowed from those gods. I love studying Enki. What a strange Prometheus type god. Prometheus. These are really interesting deities for me because Prometheus is that strange empathizing deity to humanity, while the other gods seem so above us that they don't care that much. Just shut your mouth and don't be too loud. Don't bother us in many cases. Prometheus seems to want to connect to the human realm, to the human side. And I see that in Inky. I see that in other figures, like even in Enoch, you kind of find this remnant of a Dapa myth. It's hard for me to wrap my head around exactly which one, but for me, because we have a really well documented Greek mythology and there's so much of it that it's easy to trace and track, I like to see that and then go backwards and forward and then look at the Bible too. Because I think there's some overlap. I do not think that they are so separate societies that Greek mythology and biblical mythology just have nothing in common, or they're completely separate and they only get their sources from the much earlier Mesopotamian stuff. I think there is some type of communication in some way, shape, or form between many of the biblical authors and what's going on in the Greek world as well. And I'm not even necessarily needing it to be Hellenistic. I'm saying I flirt with it, but I think there's more going on, more communication in the ancient world about these stories and how these genres influence each other. So, Melly, sorry for the long answer that didn't answer your question specifically, but gives you kind of an idea. And I'm sure if you bring up another guy, I'll go, oh, yeah, I like that god too. That's a good one because this. So, is it reminiscence? Forgive me if I butchered the name, my friend. Have you read Azazel by Yusuf Zaiden? The original is Arabic, but there's an English version. You will enjoy it. No, I have not. Azazel. I know about Azazel being like this desert demon in the ancient Near East, or specifically the biblical text. Azazze or Zeel. Yosef Zaiden. Got it. Okay, I will. Is that in the English? Looks like that looks to be English because the front has English on it. And it is 1890 for the paperback. All right. I'll save it to one of my recommended books and check it out. When I get the chance, I'll try to check that out and dive in, see what's going on there. Thank you so much for that super chat and bringing it to my attention. I have not read it. Daniel Whitaker, I appreciate your showing Greek mythology ties. Thank you, Daniel. I love it. Whether they're genetic or not, it's clearly in the same genre. That I can say with high confidence. And I think that the give and take of who came first, who borrowed from whom, I think it's both. I think it's both directions, and it just depends on the case. I look at Ovid's Metamorphosis, and you see an apocalyptic flood narrative where it's Jupiter and Hermes. Can't remember which god it is. It's in the Roman context, but Jupiter and one of them, the gods, I think Hermes, goes to the town and goes to 1,000 homes looking for hospitality because they need to eat. And 1,000 homes tell them middle finger, get away from my house. I'm not helping you. Then they end up on the outskirts of the town where an old couple lives and they're the poorest in the whole town. And they invite these gods that they don't even know into their home. They don't know their gods. Give them the last bit of food that they have and the very little bit of wine they had left. And during their meeting with these gods and talking, the wine just starts to replenish itself. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm giving you one example of what just I love about mythology. And they go, oh my gosh. The husband says to the wife, I can't even remember their names. These are gods. The wine keeps filling up. Go get the rooster. Give them the best thing we have. Kill the rooster. She's old. She's trying to chase the rooster, can't catch it. The gods chuckle and say, don't worry about it. We need you to come with us. We need you to get on this mountain because we're about to wipe out everybody in town for being inhospitable. That's the sin. Well, many scholars, classicists included, have observed an overlap with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis with this narrative. And what's ironic is in that destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, we know it says rains. It says it rains hailstorms and fire. But it talks about this almost like a lake. We talk about liquid, right? Lake of fire. There's like watery language, but it being fire destruction. And what did they do in that town? They were inhospitable to the angels that were there with Lot. And that is the ultimate sin. It wasn't homosexuality. Are you kidding me? No, look at how they're treating them. They're not treating them you should treat a stranger, and that's a theoxany. So I love looking at these connections. I tend to think that they're inspired somehow by this example that we find in Genesis, and we can go on and on. Patrick Skywalker quoting scripture is banned on social media now. It's common knowledge Yahweh is Baal. They don't want this being exposed. I think there's I don't know if you watched my video yesterday. Dr. Robert Cargill talked about the identity of Baal and El being fused into Yahweh. So I get the conflation of why people think Baal is Yahweh, because he performs the similar activities as a storm god and as a warrior deity like Baal, the rider of the clouds, very much in the same way. But I don't want us to get parallelomania to the point where Yahweh is Baal, in the sense that we don't realize that actually what they've done is absorbed this deity and his activities into Yahweh. That's what a lot of the academics are saying. Now, I'm not ruling out the possibility that literally in some sense, he is this. I just think it's likely that just like El and El Shaddai, as Dr. Cargill said yesterday, are two different deities in Ugarit mythology, and Baal all kind of get fused. You even find in Francesca Stavrakopoulou's work, God and Anatomy, where she points out that even elements of Asherah and her duties as the Queen of Heaven get consumed into Yahweh as well. He becomes mother of Israel at times. He's a father. Why are we giving him the duties of what motherhood would have been there? And so are those elements fossils of Asherah worship and Asherah duties in the mythology that are now being assumed or done on behalf of Yahweh, where they kicked the Queen of Heaven out, and now we have the Father who does all these things. He's the rider of the clouds. He's the ultimate dictator of heaven. He's the mother and the father and all of these activities. So I love learning this stuff. I don't know. I love learning it, but thank you, Patrick, for the super chat. And I don't know about the band on social media quoting scripture. I quote it all the time. So I don't know where that's at. Maybe you're just saying people are not wanting to hear what you're saying or something. I don't know. Karen Richardson, thank you for the super sticker. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. Let me see if I've missed a comment by you. I've been in the super chat section. Anyone who's ever dealt with StreamYard, please forgive me if I miss your comments. I literally go into a different section where I can't even see your comments, and I'm reading the super chats sequentially and any super stickers or members, things like that. So when I see a super sticker, it doesn't show me any text. And some people might drop a super sticker and then leave a comment right after that they want read. And I'm scrolling down to try and find it. We have quite a few commenters. If you haven't liked the video yet, hit the like button. YouTube pays attention to that, and they will recommend the video to more audience. More of my subscribers will get notified that this live's happening when you do that. It's YouTube algorithm. I can't read its mind. Okay, I don't see one. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the love and just helping out, keeping the lights on, and doing what we're doing here. Okay, here we go. Pie. I almost want to say pie because I love the Life of Pi movie. Thank you for that super chat. Inspiring philosophy, I imagine, is IP. Matthew, literary use Hebrew, obvious. So this is the donkey shenanigans again, which day after tomorrow, I'm streaming with Dr. James Tabor. We're going to be showing 5 very, very powerful examples of how Matthew changed Mark. Like, it's so obvious. I don't know. I'm already imagining gymnastics and someone doing some like crazy backflips to get out of it, but it's obvious. And the scholars have known this for centuries. So he's coming on, and we're going to talk about that because he has a course on Mark that really nails Mark for Mark. We are so guilty of going to Matthew, Luke, and John to understand Mark. And we got to stop doing that if we're going to understand what Mark's intention was. I brought this up to Kipp, but like one example. In Mark, Jesus speaks in parables and tells you why. Why does he speak in parables, Derek? He doesn't want them to understand. He doesn't want them to understand. The synoptic parallel in Matthew, he speaks in parables so that people will understand. Do the backflips all you want, okay? Do all the backflips you want. If you miss it, then you just don't get why Matthew might want to change that in Mark. Bart Ehrman brings it up all the time. In Mark, when Jesus goes to heal, seems reluctant, but does it anyway, he gets angry. The synoptic parallel in Matthew, he's happy to heal them. He's not angry. The list goes on, and those may not be examples that Dr. James Tabor brings up, but I figure just to mention them, how hard do you want to work to solve all these problems and to fix it? I mean, it's like we can go to the Quran, right, David Wood? Right, my friends, my Christians? We can go to the Quran. We could do this all day. The sleepers of Ephesus, the sleepers in the cave, the legend, the folktale that we find of them sleeping in this cave makes its way into the Quran. Dorka 9, the Alexander romance that we find in the Quran, Jesus turning clay birds into living birds. The list can go on, right? You can follow me there. You could follow me in problems and things like that. When we get to the New Testament, everybody watch me. I'm going to do some serious backflips. Here we go. And in some cases, there may be justified reason to think it isn't necessarily contradicting or isn't necessarily those conclusions. But notice they want to die on every example, every hill that you bring up. And it's like, at some point, you have to imagine special pleadings taking place. Thank you, Pi. Easy Shada. Thank you so much for the super chat. I am subject of Ymir. I am a subject of Ymir. I don't know what Ymir is, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Forgive me. Help me out. Does anybody know what that means? Scrolling down. I'm looking for this particularly in the chat. Oh, Kipp Davis was giving some context to the previous thing about Sodom and Gomorrah, and I missed it. It's because I'm in the super chat section. I'm looking for the Ymir. I don't see anybody. Ymir is Norse? I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for the super chat. Back to the transformational coach. Did I miss a comment by you? Thank you for the super sticker. Best way to support you, YouTube of Patreon? Honestly, I think Patreon takes a little less, than YouTube does. I also have options like one-time donations for people who want that kind of route or whatever. But if you want to become part of the family and stay with the symbol and stuff next to you, you could do that on YouTube for when I go live, or the Patreon, which I'm planning on doing private live Zooms with Patreon. So it just depends on the option. I'll be doing that Zoom, by the way, with Patreon and members of YouTube. So don't worry, we're going to make sure both sides are covered. Thank you so much for the super chat. Patrick is back again. If I write, Why does your God favor people for burning children alive? Judges 11. YouTube will delete the comment. Question. Try it. Okay. So this may be my personal YouTube channel's comment section. I get people all the time who are not fans of what I did in the video commenting, "You deleted my comment. Your channel doesn't allow comments like this." Believe it or not, I rarely have to delete any comments. I really, the reason I keep my comments clean, and you have an option in the settings on YouTube, is to say inappropriate comments automatically, just have them automatically removed. YouTube deems what comments are appropriate or not. So oftentimes that happens. And keep in mind that when rhetoric like that rhetoric comes up like that, oftentimes it's an attack at me or the scholar. And I've had people who I've interviewed who have been extremely disrespected and they're derogatory. And if you allow that ugliness to just run rampant, I don't think advertisers, I don't think YouTube likes that kind of stuff. So I prefer to just have a much more kosher comment section. At the same time, very rarely have I ever deleted it, but I can understand why they might be triggered by some of the language in that Jephthah story with sacrificing his only daughter or only child. And yeah, so I imagine it tiptoes into the lines of people who are speaking very negatively or bad online, and YouTube probably does that. I just think it's interesting. I figured I'd comment about that because you're going to see people who are like, "My comment doesn't come through. How come you don't allow it?" And then someone's like, "I'm reading your comment right now. What are you talking about?" And they like have a conspiracy in their head that I am deleting their comments. YouTube's deleting your comment. I don't know what you said, but that's probably not in your case because I imagine we agree that Jephthah's daughter is a burnt offering to Yahweh and it doesn't look good. You know what I mean? Anyway, thanks, Patrick, for that super chat. And Patrick's back again. It says, "Not you, Derek, other YouTube channels." Okay. Yeah, I'm telling you, this channel, it also happens where people's stuff gets deleted. I'm caught up on super chats now. So I'm in your okay, we got another one here. let me take the super chat here. Clay, thank you for the super chat. How did you ever consider the idea that historical Jesus didn't exist? When Paul literally met and knew the apostle Peter, do you think Peter was fake? Okay, so there's a few things here in this super chat. When you asked, how did you ever consider the idea that historical Jesus didn't exist? In my mind, to give you my observations in a nutshell, I once believed Jesus wasn't just a historical man, but he was God in the flesh. In my deconversion story, my history of deconverting, I started to observe categories, genres that are clearly mythic in other figures. And a lot of these elements look very similar to what we see and identify with Jesus in the Gospels. I started seeing so much of it in the Gospels that I started going, whoa. And I gravitated toward scholars and thinkers who were saying, look at all of this mythology. This guy doesn't even probably exist. Probably. And it's tempting. So the way they would have answered the second part of that, did you think Peter was fake and that Paul met the apostle Peter? They, the mythicists, would say, look, Paul, Peter, all of these guys had a heavenly Jesus who, at the time of the writing of Paul, is not a historical man on earth. He is in heaven talking to Paul. Paul's having some type of experience that he's saying he's getting revelation from the Christ, who is this already deified figure. And then the argument of the mythicists is that he's always been heavenly. He's always been in outer space, so to speak. Never was an earthly person. That's the most common kind of Richard Carrier, Bob Price position of mythicism. And there may be other mythicists who take that the narratives of a historical guy in the past was invented. I don't know, but that was tempting. And it's very easy to see why one might draw that conclusion, especially when you don't have more concrete data to nail this guy down in history like we'd like. So it's easy to see why that's a tempting conclusion for a skeptic and for someone who sees all this mythology about this guy who most likely did not do all these things attributed to him. Then I started to backpedal a little, thinking, okay, hold on. How common was it to take historical figures and add mythology about them? And I started seeing that this has happened with several contemporaneous figures to Jesus. And I would even put Apollonius of Tyana in that category of a historical figure who's completely practically mythologized. And of course, is written by Philostratus a few centuries later, but he references sources that were much earlier. And this was a guy that was contemporaneous in the first century around the time that Jesus existed, but he's like a Roman philosopher type guru, cult leader, similar to how you have Jesus. So that is how my thinking went. So it's easy to go from this to all that, especially when you start getting overwhelmed with how much mythology. And when I say mythology, theology can fit into mythology, is what I'm saying. Sacrifices for sins and stuff like that. You're like, whoa, 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 what? Like, this is in that kind of weird theological vein of imaginary stuff, in my view. And that kind of takes you through, I would say, why that temptation happened and why I still don't rule it out, but I'm not persuaded by it as the most likely conclusion now, even though it could be. Certainty is blasphemy of the holy myth vision. We shouldn't be absolutely certain on some of these conclusions. But one might go, but you're not certain Jesus didn't rise from the dead, are you? I have very good reasons to think the same way I don't think that the various other stories and figures didn't, that Jesus didn't as well. But why would you draw that conclusion? I don't know. How common is it that people rise from the dead? You know, do we see this? Is this normal? No, no, no. But you're not getting the revelation and the cumulative case. Yeah, we can go down that rabbit trail and endlessly. Holy frickin' smokes! Did I just get bombarded by a bunch of super chats? I did. I thought that. Okay, all right. Let me try to be a little more succinct. Teresa W, thank you for the super chat. The cash is for Ryan. Thank you, thank you. I've learned so much from your show. Thank you so much. Let me give you a little secret here, Teresa. All of the cash goes to Ryan. So the queen of MythVision, she's happy wife, happy life, and thank you so much for the super chat. I'll tell her if she isn't watching this right now, doing other things. I'll tell her that you super chatted specifically for her. Samuel Penrod, thank you for this super chat here. This channel has helped me in my deconstruction process. Thanks for all your work. Thank you, Samuel. I appreciate the love and support. I'm glad that it's helped, and I hope that it continues to help you as I'm on a journey myself in trying to understand these ancient stories from a scholarly point of view. All right. Google sucks is super chatting next. And I need to see if there's a comment under Google sucks. Scrolling up. Okay. Google sucks. Super chatted. Don't see. Scrolling up a little. Thank you. I don't see one. I just want to make sure I didn't leave you hanging. And you did it twice. Thank you so much for that. M Doug, super sticker. Thank you, M Doug, for the super sticker here. Now I got to find your super sticker. Make sure you didn't comment. And if you did, I got to read it. Huh. Nothing. Just showing love. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that support. Built Live. Forgive me if I butchered your name. Thank you for the super chat and for being a member of MythVision. Hello, I'm watching from Norway. Do you plan to do another astro theology video, Old and New Testament? I love that stuff. I'm sure it's going to come up. I'm sure we're going to cover it. And maybe at some point we should focus on what I think is really astrotheology in the Bible somewhere. That might be interesting. I know the Babylonians did this, and if any of the Hebrews were clearly influenced by Babylonian thought, mathematics, mythology, stories, folktale, whatever it is, there may be some of that in these later biblical writings. And so I've backed off of that because typically the people who do it are in that kind of they're in a category that I would say is not as scholarly. I'm trying to be as respectful too, because I don't mean it in a negative way, but like they're in the more esoteric vein of like everything is astrotheology and they go down this rabbit trail of like you need the key of our esoteric interpretations to understand the Bible and there's chakras, and without the interpretation of the seventh day, which is the seventh chakra, which is the seven hearts of the soul, and in that moment, and it's like zodiac reading and all that kind of stuff. I don't get into that stuff anymore. I want to be able to try and look at this stuff with good methodology to understand what's going on in the text. And I bet you there is some of this stuff there, but I just think that those methods, the people who are the ones who are pioneering those kind of conversations, aren't rigorous academic in their approach. That's my take on it. So I'd like to do it from a critical scholarly background or critical scholarly point of view. Ty is back. Dr. Kipp, please read True Scholars. He used Hebrew. Well, thank you, Pi, for that. I appreciate that. And Kipp does read Hebrew. Kipp does understand that, and he knows some Greek. And I think back to our donkey scenario with Matthew, there's some interesting observations that Dr. Kipp has looked at, and he's been reading various scholars who've made commentaries and comments about this particular passage. It's an interesting, weird, nerding out rabbit trail you can get lost in. But bringing up Matthew for one moment the other day when all this, let's call it apologist, anti-apologist drama on the Gospel of Matthew and what's going on with the two donkeys, I thought it was really interesting because we want to know why too. And some have said, well, it's because Matthew misread a Hebrew parallelism. There have been scholars who've said this. It's not off the table, but what's the most likely conclusion? And I thought, the live stream that Michael Jones had with Stephen Boise, or Boyce, I don't know if I'm properly pronouncing the last name there. I really like Stephen. I'm friends with Michael too, and I enjoy learning and hearing this pushback. I'd love to have dialogue with them on this at some point and have our differences brought out. But Boise, Stephen said he's open to there have only ever been one donkey. Now, I'm speaking historically, which would then mean that Matthew is crafting a literary narrative, inventing two donkeys. Now, that is so awesome to hear someone I would say is a conservative scholar like Christian. I would say he's a scholar in his own right in terms of Christianity. And he's willing to admit that much that maybe Matthew's doing something literary and it's not actual history. I think Mike Lacona got in trouble for stuff like this in addressing the what we call zombie apocalypse at the end of Matthew. I reached out to Stephen, my buddy Stephen Nelson, who's he's very sharp when it comes to Greek and pulling up sources. And I said, Stephen, will you do me a favor and will you look and see if it's only in the Gospel of Matthew that when Jesus appears before Pontius Pilate and there's the Barabbas and Jesus, if it's the Gospel of Matthew that has Jesus Barabbas. And in the earliest sources of the Gospel of Matthew we have, only in the Gospel of Matthew do you have a Jesus Barabbas, which is, I think, the Barabbas that comes from Aramaic, Jesus Ketu, but it's the idea of son of the Father, Jesus Barabbas, and then Jesus, whom they call the Christ, who's also son of the Father. Matthew has two donkeys, two demoniacs, when Mark only has one, and then you have two Jesuses. Go to Mark. His name's not Jesus Barabbas. It's Barabbas. And why? Well, if we opened the commentary of Matthew, speaking of Davies and Allison, they give an excellent response that Matthew's trying to gear further away from the revolution that took place with the Jews and Rome. And Barabbas literally says in Mark that he is in there, he's guilty of insurrection. Well, they don't want Jesus possibly being grouped with an insurrectionist. Like, so Matthew wants to kind of paint a different way away from what Mark is saying. And then he doubles up the Jesuses, giving him the name Jesus Barabbas. It's more literary, is the point. So I thought that was fascinating, and I'm hoping Allison has similar observations pertaining to the doubles that we find all throughout Matthew, which means how confident should you be reading Matthew about what is literally, historically, what is the case when he is crafting narrative? Anyway, did my little rabbit trail. Want to save the best, I guess, for going into that and with Allison and James Tabor in Day After Tomorrow. Who knows? We'll see what they all have to say. Gentle Esther, thank you for the super chat. I hope I said your name properly. Love your channel. Always a great listen. No question. Just enjoying the live. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love and the super chat. Doc Ploromanot, nothing pithy, just tithing. Thanks, Doc. I really appreciate the love and support and always being here in the chat with those very, very complex questions, making me have to think. I appreciate it. Google Sucks says, look at The Philosophy of Redemption by Philip Mainlander. He takes Christ's teaching as atheist and creation as a self-decide, now in English. The Philosophy of Redemption. Let me look this up. I imagine there's more doubles than Matthew, by the way. The Philosophy of Redemption. It's $20 on paperback. An ambitious philosophical vision. He claimed not only to confirm the teachings of Buddhism and Christianity, but also to reconcile religion with science and put atheism on a scientific foundation. All this he integrates with a cosmology that reads the universe as the emanation of a primordial event, which he construes as God's self-destruction. The universe is therefore the disintegrating relic of a divinity, a discordant unity of individual beings, egoistic manifestations of a will to death, all striving for absolute annihilation. Mainlander's bleak but rapturous prognosis is here, published in English for the first time. That's an interesting philosophy. It sounds kind of like the in a way. Well, no, it's totally different than that. I was going to say there's a idealism philosopher that I've interviewed before, but the universe is just this. A god died, and we're like the remnants of that deity. It sounds like that's interesting. Sounds more fictive, but like a fun way of trying to look at the world around you. I feel like that's maybe something to check out. Thank you so much for the super chat. Kristen Hood, thank you so much for the love. Good to see you here. She's an OG. She's been here since day one. Thanks for encouraging great discussions and always promoting critical thinking. May MythVision continue to challenge us for years to come. Thank you so much. Appreciate the love, Kristen. And yes, I want to keep the critical thinking and the conversations and the debates and all that, and hearing these other brilliant minds bring different takes to the table. And that's the goal, right? Let's challenge ourselves. Love you. Thank you for the love. John Hodge. Hey, dude, what are your thoughts on having more Eastern scholarship on, like Vedic religions? Is it Taoism, Buddhism, etc.? Absolutely. I want to do that. I just need critical scholarship in that vein and getting connected to those scholars and start easing our way into doing those kind of discussions. And I feel like a good way is to potentially find a bridge between where I'm at now into those discussions, those topics. To give you an example, some of the Proto Indo European myths that we find in Hinduism in the Sanskrit text look like you can go way back and also see some bridge to Mesopotamian mythology, that there's some connection there that goes way, way back. I haven't read this work myself. I saw a lecture only for a few moments where the guy was making this brief connection. He was a scholar. I'd like to do that kind of stuff. And, because, I like to compare the myths and see where they connect and all that. But yeah, at some point it's bound to happen, especially as we learn more and expand our connections with other academics in different fields. Callan Radu, thank you for being a member and for what is this? Super chat. I'm the devil, Callan says. Well, good for you, Callan. Thanks for the love. Appreciate you showing up in the chat. Victor Engelman, 2 donkeys are from Zechariah 9:9. Matthew 21:5 is almost a verbatim quote of that. And that's what Kipp's trying to point out. But I think it's actually a Hebrew parallelism of a single donkey that is in the Zechariah 9:9 thing. But look, I want to save all the juicy stuff here because this is exactly how Mark interpreted it, as a single donkey. Luke and John understood it as a single donkey. It's only Matthew that doubles it up. Is that from a misunderstanding, or is that purposeful? And if it is purposeful, let's draw out all the reasons he would purposely create 2. I can already see how apologists will go, there was actually 2 donkeys in all of the accounts, but they only mentioned one in Mark, Luke, and John, to get away from Matthew not having the historical truth. They just have to say, well, there really were 2 donkeys the whole time. Mark just wanted to mention one. Luke just wanted to mention one. John just wanted to mention one. I could see the gymnastics. Instead of saying Matthew's inventive, creating and crafting an interesting dual donkey scenario, dual demoniac scenario, dual Jesus is, at his trial scenario. The list can go on. I think that how do you do that? You just keep saying, well, there was really 2 demoniacs in Mark. You only mentioned one. You get where I'm going with this. Margaret DeVelden, good to see you, Margaret. Thank you so much for being here, part of the family. Gotta go. Just love for what you keep doing. Cheers, Derek. Well, thank you, Margaret. Appreciate the love. I really appreciate everybody showing up, throwing some supers at us, and hanging out with me. I think it's time, now that I've caught up on the super chats, to just mention what we've got coming up. I've got a course that I plan on doing on the Apostle Paul with Dr. James D. Tabor. You're going to want to stay tuned. We have some courses that are coming out with Dr. Joshua Bowen. One is on slavery in the Bible, and another one is going to be on mythology that influenced the Bible, specifically Genesis. And he'll probably go into other examples as well there. 2 courses coming out with Egyptologist Karakuni on Genesis creation mythology in ancient Egypt, and resurrection mythology in ancient Egypt. What did they believe about resurrection? And I will just say it's super sexual, extremely sexual. I mean, just stay tuned. I'll let her teach the course, but it just blows my mind how there was no shame at all in just, getting sexual in their creation, in their death and resurrection, in their entire mythology. It's awesome to actually learn that stuff and realize, wow, Egypt ruled Canaan. Ugarit has the same thing. Mesopotamia has the same thing, in the sense that there's lots of sexual stuff in their mythology. You get to the Bible with this ancient Near Eastern deity, But the Bible is insulated from that. How dare you try to point out any possible fossils of sexual stuff with God? How dare you? You should never do that. Don't you know? Our God would never, never partake in those pagan, ancient Near Eastern uh, images that we find in the world in which this arose. Don't you know there was a force field in the society? They had zero influence from the rest of the known world. You hateful people who just want to poke holes in the Bible. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? Don't you know? You know in your heart of hearts that ours is true. Okay, being funny. Yeah, just going somewhere with that. I think going somewhere and nowhere at the same time. Anyway, I love everybody here. Let's see what we got. Derek had to go with a budget Egyptologist like Karakuni because a big shot like this. Oh God, Kipp, you better stop being a comedian here, dude. You better stop being a comedian. Whoa, you're a trip, man. Uh, I don't even want to get involved in all of that nonsense that keeps happening. Yeah. Anywho, Kipp, thanks for the distraction, man. Matthew K in the hizzy, Walter seed. Oh, there's so much seed spilling going on in the Bible. Um it's- never mind. It's not that. Isn't this woke? I guess I'm not asleep, I can tell you that. So uh don't stop being a comedian, Nathaniel said. You know, you're sick. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Absolutely, it's hyperbole. Duh. Of course it's hyperbole. It's all hyperbole. Yeah, that gets really, really transmitted into the Bible, but not so much with the others. I appreciate everybody here. Is there any final must get it off your chest? You have to ask. We have to, you know, before I go, anybody? When I think you mean to say truth is found to be lies, MythVision opens the eyes. Thank you so much. I like the little jingle there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Derek, Matthew used Hebrew. Okay, so is that what you're actually saying? I'm trying to. I didn't know if these are sarcastic super chats or you're sincere in thinking that Matthew used Hebrew in these particular passages. I don't think that's the most plausible, uh, personally, but I'm no linguist at all. I'm just listening to the arguments from the different scholars. I think the Septuagint, when it's verbatim to a certain point, I understand how Stephen will bring in that he thinks he just switches over to Hebrew at that time. I'm going to let Kipp, because we've talked about this off record, off air. I'm going to let Kipp bring up what his observations have been, how we have sources where there's clearly different Greek readings of the Septuagint that are not the Septuagint we have today in Dead Sea Scroll material. This might help educate or make people realize that we do not have all the Greek versions of the Bible that they did have. What is more likely? Oh, and I need to add some little detail here. In those observations of that Greek text, you can see how the Greek is trying to look and model itself more after the Masoretic or the Hebrew text. So you have Greek versions that are trying to accommodate to the Hebrew version. And this, we have remnants of it, not from that particular Zechariah 9:9, but once you see that, what's more likely? You just, okay, we got the Greek today. All right, I'm gonna go here. Oh, stop. Let me pull up my Hebrew now. Okay, now we're gonna put this little last sentence from the Hebrew. Hold on. All right, hold on. We got to fulfill this one over here, Bobby. Hold on. I don't like that one. I'm going to take it from the Greek over here on that one. Actually, let's go back to the Hebrew on this one. Is there an Aramaic version somewhere? Nope. Let's go back to the Hebrew. No. Oh, actually, let's go back. Okay. That's not what I think's going on there. It's written in Greek. I understand church father stuff. You talk about Papias. There's some Aramaic or possibly Aramaic version of some sayings gospel that may exist. That's Matthew somehow, and then you got to go out of the way to say, well, how do we get to this Greek version from this saying over here, Papias, assuming there's an Aramaic version floating around somewhere? Is Matthew incorporating sayings from that Aramaic version and crafting a narrative? Maybe. We know there's some hints at Aramaic stuff going on in these gospels, but as far as like this was all originally that's a whole different can of worms. Caleb, thank you for the super chat, or not super chat. I'm so used to getting them. Just comment. Derek, what caused or influenced you to have a naturalist view? I think it's just, I've always thought with magical thinking. And when I started to observe these gods, these religions looking very man made with similar patterns that humans have constructed, and rewriting and recreating and renegotiating their observations, the deities evolve with the humans that are clearly also evolving in their thinking about the world around them. And usually, staunch believers think it's the other way around. They think it's divine revelation that God's slowly revealing himself so humanity progressively is getting better. I tend to think humans are perceiving their gods. Like, is it Xenophanes, the ancient Greek philosopher, who said if horses could draw images of their gods, they'd look like gods. And if, I don't know, I'm throwing that out there, dogs could draw images of their gods, they'd look like dogs. The gods usually are in the image of the worshipers. And that's such a human thing. And I think that makes the most sense. And so it led me to start going, okay, I never believed in evolution as a Christian. Now I factor in these observations and how much death it took to get, how many mutations and how much death it took to get where we are now. I started going, man, the God idea for me is really hard to swallow, especially when all of them are in these ancient texts. And it made me start to think, just maybe there's another way of explaining and observing the world around me without incorporating a deity. And that is when I started to listen to people who said, you don't need to have a God to explain these things. And I started going down a more naturalist route in considering that maybe there is no magic happening in that sense. And so, of course, many theists who would criticize my conclusions, well, where did life come from? We have not observed the origins of life from abiogenesis and such and things like that. So you can go and listen to scientists in the field there that explain, we don't know exactly how this happened, but good reason to think it did. I give the analogy in one way of saying, if I am in Washington State, in the western side of the United States, and I have a friend in Egypt, and I spoke to him on the phone and said, hey, man, everything good? I'm here in Washington. And in 1 hour, I'm on his couch, but I'm dead. He can't question me. And he goes, how did Derek get on my couch within 1 hour? And he was in Washington State, which is thousands and thousands of miles, probably 6, 7, 8,000 miles away. How did he get here so quickly? Did he fly on a jet? Possibly. 1 hour seems a little bit too good to be true. Let's just say 5 hours, whatever. Jet? Possibly. Regular car? Well, he had to cross over the sea. That's not possible. How did he get here? He instantly teleported. That'd be the least likely position you might take. You'd want to literally rule out every other possibility, which is more likely than me teleporting to your couch. And so I tend to take those kind of approaches to the world around me now rather than abracadabra. And so that is why I ended up starting to think this makes more sense when we look at the world that way. Could I be wrong? Sure. On Robertson says, you need to grab AP and go after David Wood, have the conversation in the morning, and call the thread Morning Wood. I love the humor. I do want to have a conversation with David Wood, and I don't mind. I'd be cool to have AP there too, because I know that AP is not a Christian, but yeah, I don't mind having conversations with people I disagree with, and I'm sure we could find common ground on criticizing Islam in many ways. At the same time, I'm trying to bring it to ancient Judaism, Christianity, and of course, I would apply the same thing if there was a strong, powerful movement of worshipers of Dionysus or Hercules or whoever else that were impacting us in such a psychological, such a political, such a real life sense, then yeah, I'd have something to bring to the table. And guess what? Early Christians did just that when they were critiquing the other gods of those who worshiped the pagan pantheon in Rome or in Greece or whatever it was. They did exactly that. They were criticizing them. I went on and on about that. Scrolling down, scrolling down. There was a movement in the late Second Temple period among Greek versions to get closer to the Hebrew text. Bingo. Of course, you're going to end up showing this, I'm sure, when we have that conversation, but it's important. Yes, the ancient people that were engaging with Matthew was Bobby and Bill. They were from southern Judah. That's right. That's right. They were down there in the south, boy. Let me tell you what. Let's see. I'm scrolling up. Note one does not have to have a label. In fact, I think it's might be a smarter move when you're engaging online. Like Dan McClellan, he's not like out here saying this is my ontology or this is my position, which I think is a very smart move because then people can take your argument without trying to pigeonhole you, poison the well already. If you're that, you're already wrong. If you're a naturalist, you're everything you think you know is wrong. If you're this, everything you already think is wrong instead of dealing with arguments for argument's sake, the actual case in front of you. And that's a wise move. It's also wise because it doesn't segregate you from a tribe or particular community. In some cases, Dan dies on certain hills that I think are important, social issues and such. And I appreciate him for that. Standing up for women, standing up for equal rights and stuff that's there. I want I want to use him as an example there to point out that maybe I'd be more successful if I wasn't an atheist. But like it doesn't bother me even if atheism weren't the case. I'm not like if there is a deity, I'm not bothered by it. I've kind of had my peace with the idea that if there was something in it and I ended up dying and going before it, I very much doubt that it is what I've read that is so man-made. I'm not persuaded at all that that's the case. So I think it would be indifferent, almost deistic or something to that effect at best. Or I just don't find it personal in that respect. I get why the temptation's there, but I think there's some psychology involved in reflecting one's own thoughts and such, and assuming agency is there when it's not. That's all natural. That comes as part of evolution to survive. I don't think that's real necessarily. That little brushel in the bush over there, is that a lion to come eat me, or is it just wind? Well, this agency observation on clouds, volcanoes, earthquakes, they thought these were gods. We now can explain in a natural sense what they are. Therefore, doing a good job falsifying that the deities are actively doing these things, there's no reason to then assert that they are, but the God becomes unfalsifiable, invisible, outside space and time. The list goes on and on. Anyway, I rabbit trailed off that to say, no, you don't have to have a label. I just speak my mind and tell you where I'm at. And I am always subject to change as I learn more and where I go. If I ended up down the road thinking that theism made the most sense, guess who will become a freaking theist? Whether many viewers like it or not? Me. I don't care. That's not the point. I can tell you what I'm definitely convinced is not the case. The God of the Bible. I'm pretty persuaded. And unless that God did some radical changing things on biblical proportions, like, the stories in the Bible emphasize what a miracle looks like, and those kind of things happen to me. Well, why would you, if you were God, why would you have these texts written with unbelievable, literally stories, extravagant miracles, and such? And then when someone is not a believer, not do those things to overcome their doubt. You're willing to do it with Thomas, you're not willing to do it with them. And Thomas looks like a literary motif. He's winking at you, saying, "Blessed are those who don't see, yet still believe." Um, Come break this hard heart, as they would probably perceive me, this cold heart, this hardened heart. Come break it and prove yourself. And it's over. I am yours. You know what I mean? I'm not convinced that's going to happen. I think these are books with stories, but I am like, if it happened, it happened. And I don't think I could persuade anyone else based on my experience. But I could promise you, if it happened to me, I'd be the nutcase shouting it from the rooftops, whether or not you believed it or not. So you might go, well, your faculties are failing you, Derek. But of course, I would factor in, am I hallucinating? Could this be the case? The list can go on. Subjective experiences are powerful. So I'd love to have a way to know that it's not hallucination. Anyway, Greg Royce, Royce, forgive me if I butchered your last name there. I posted a Dr. Kipp vid to my debate group. One response: there's no way that Satan looking dude is a qualified scholar. Yeah, you know what? I used to think of Aaron Ra, and I'm like, look at this evil, hateful man. When I was a Christian years ago, and I came across a video of him debating one of these Christians, this evil person. He's just, and of course, my mind has changed after meeting Aaron. He's like a giant teddy bear. But I knew when I met Kipp that he was like a solid heavy metal guy. I knew that out the gate. The shirt he wore, the goatee, the beard, the rocking the hat. Like the dude was rock and roll. I could tell heavy metal. So yeah, I could see. There's no way that Satan looking dude is a qualified scholar. We have such perceptions in these kind of conservative Christian circles. Daniel, is it Kaiser? Forgive me. Anyone talked about the donkey in Matthew being intentional satire, like the genealogy? I think it's kind of an upside down encomium. This is from a different pod. Parody and Subversion in Matthew's Gospel by Bart Newton. That's interesting. It could be. No matter what, it looks literary. I'm editing. I do editing for Bart Ehrman's courses and his podcast on YouTube and stuff. So me and the queen, Ryan, my wife, edit for Bart, and his course coming up on Matthew. I was editing it in light of all of this online back and forth to the apologist, and he said something interesting while I was editing it. He said, "Look at the star that's hovering over the house. How does a star hover over a house? We know what stars are, and you have the star right above the house of where Jesus is at. You almost can't visualize what it really is. And so it sounds more like a story. It's made up. It's not what actually happened. And if this is what's going on in the birth narrative in Matthew, why can't this be happening here with the donkeys, the demoniacs, the Pontius Pilate scene, or wherever you want to go? Why can't that be the case in Matthew's gospel? I don't get it. But I definitely need to check out this parody and subversion in Matthew's gospel. And that's by who? Because it didn't pop up. Bert Newton. Okay, let me see this up. That's on Buzzsprout. Is that's on a podcast? Is there a okay, Audible. It's on Audible? Interesting. So it's on Audible. Even better because I've been needing to use some of my credits. So I will download that when I get off of the stream. Thank you for the notice there. I'm interested in diving deeper. Thank you. Oh, so Pi, why are you all attacking me? Because I am Christian? Again, Christian persecution all over. I knew it. God is my shepherd. I am not afraid. Okay. Interesting. Let me scroll down here. Okay, everybody. I think I'm going to go eat. I think it's time. I appreciate everybody in the chat. It's amazing how Bart and Daniel Wallace will look at the exact same data and conclude different things. Yep, that happens a lot. That happens a lot. Really appreciate it. Angelo, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't. You just got to come and proselytize. Like that. It's like a repeat thing that always happens. You know what I mean? Come on, man. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Derek, what is it that made you stop believing in the resurrection? I think the first step was me recognizing how many other claims there are for gods and cults of their heroes and such. Then when you realize that, hold on, he's not the only claim in town. And in fact, when you start realizing contemporaneous that there are many other figures that have similar types of myths and motifs, why this one's true and those aren't, I can't see why I would then make this one true and not recognize the others also in the similar category. I guess you start letting go of confidence and certainty on this one. And then you start realizing, like, why am I special pleading for this one? Because it was a cult that was successful? Like, and then, that's typically the approach. They're willing to die, these kind of things. So it's martyrological, which Jews were willing to die for their beliefs and faith and such. And that was all the way up to the Jewish temple, Bar Kokhba, the list goes on. Muslims are willing to die. Their religion became popular. Christians say, look how false this is. It's so obvious. David Wood talks about the most obvious false prophet in the world, David Wood would say, is Muhammad. Well, look at how many Muslims there are in the world who believe this. The list goes on. That's not an argument that's convincing or persuasive. And it just fits the zeitgeist of all the heroes in Jewish, Roman, and Greek myth, and the legendary figures of humans who were mythologized. He just goes right there in the midst of it. It's like someone today, in many ways, writing a comic book figure that fits into this fictional trope of other comic book figures, and then someone going, damn it, you need to believe that this guy flew with a cape on at night, flying out of a phone booth, who did this, who did that. He has anti-gravitational skills. The blind people saw and the deaf. And I'm going, I don't think Apollonius of Tyana, Asclepius, Heracles, Isis, Dionysus, the list goes on and on and on, all these figures, or Jewish heroes and figures. Like, why did I do that with this kind of particular thing? And I know, don't take me literal in every single situation. These authors knew how to have verisimilitude to reality. They weren't just writing completely fiction, we might see. But if you look at the comic books we have, some of them try to place real places, people, things, and such in their fiction narratives. So I'm trying to make a point. It just becomes a little less believable once you learn a little bit more about all the other figures and how seriously they were taken by their cults. It's like when we special plead this one, we lack all empathy and seriousness of observing how they viewed their gods and their heroes and their figures, because ours is true and this one's right. I started to let go of that and realizing, oh my gosh, this is something, this is a human phenomena. Myths are a dime a dozen, and Jesus is fitting into these categories, and I cannot unsee it. So to convince me, it ain't going to work through text, it ain't going to work through this literature. There needs to be divine intervention. I've said that over and over, but that's why, John. Good question. Thanks for asking as I'm about to go eat lunch and stuff. Oh, okay. Sorry, Pi. I'm thinking, what is going on here? I almost said, you need to get that book by Candida Moss, Myth of Persecution. Where is that book? It's guaranteed back here. I love that book. Oh, let me grab it. All right. Myth of Persecution, How Early Christians Invented a Story of Martyrdom, Candida Moss. And I hope I'm saying her name right. Candida. I like to emphasize the Dida, but I don't know if that's proper. And I'm going to be interviewing her soon on her latest book. I already spoke to her and looking forward to that conversation. But I was thinking, she, I think, identifies as a Christian and like points out the persecution complex of Christians. It's like, for example, if I poke at Otangelo because he came in here proselytizing right out the gate about his God and his belief, and he just has to come in here to preach, and I poke at it like, come on, man, why? It looks disturbing, like you're like a broken record that has to repeat itself and can't just be normal. Like you gotta keep the Shroud of Turin. Jesus has died for your sins. That kind of thing. It's like, man, chill. Like, we're not believers, but you can't stop doing it. And then he goes, "See, I'm persecuted. It's even true. We'd be persecuted for His name's sake." And it's like you're self fulfilling your own stuff. Kind of like it talks about you were never one of us if you left. Well, there's something similar to that in the Quran too. And anyway, rabbit trail off that, but thank you so much for the super chat. Let me keep rolling here. You definitely trolled me. Thank you, Spring. Appreciate that. Okay, so the God talk. Here we are again, right? I wonder if that's Otangelo because he doesn't know how to not bring up the shroud. But is empirical evidence of the resurrection? If you have evidence that it is a forgery, you can gain $1 million US, I imagine. Check David Rolfe or Rolf. I don't know how to pronounce that. If you can prove it's a forgery. I did a video on the Shroud of Turin. Have you guys ever seen that video? Anyone in the chat, if you've seen my Shroud of Turin video that I did, type 1. I'm interested. I am hangry. Carly, good observation. I'm hungry. I know, right? But Walter's seeing it too. Walter's like, Derek, go eat now. Oh, hold on. Hold on. One. So some of you have, some of you haven't. You really should go see that. I think the God talk might there's probably no help for convincing, no matter what history says about these being forged and invented and created during the medieval period. They have real depth and purpose to the people, but that they're being crafted. They're a dime a dozen, and that the one we have, of course, they don't accept the carbon dating. They don't accept this. It's just apologetics to defend their beliefs. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. All right. Oh, we got a big super here. Okay. Micah Parker. As much time as I spent engaging in pro and anti arguments in good faith as a Christian, what actually convinced me to become an atheist was going to a secular concert and realizing the Holy Spirit was serotonin. That's a good one. That's a good one. Micah, I'll tell you, I had a conversation with a Christian who brought up the experience of the Holy Spirit, the experience of the Holy Ghost to me, and with worship and all that. And I remember that feeling of worship and the music, and it hit just right and all that. I get the same kick from love songs, thinking about my wife, my family, my children, just great music that hits. And when it hits, I'm like, wow, this is just like I felt when I was in church, just like I felt when I had the presence of God. It was like the same hit. And I'm like, okay, hold on. But this is in a completely different setting, irrelevant to that. And that's exactly what I experienced as well. That's not what made me an atheist, or go down the path of being a non believer in Christianity. But it is a good observation in hindsight to go, whoa, that's very similar to this. Interesting. How do we explain that? Well, God's in the concert, don't you know? Anyway, yeah, I don't want to take anyone's head off today because I do need to eat. Um, I don't like to leave anyone hanging, and I'm having fun. So just looking at the Mr. Zeke, what you believe may not true. What's true you may not believe, because truth is stranger than fiction. What is the distinction of truth and belief? Derek. Well, it depends on your definitions, right? It depends on your definitions of truth. Um, in that context of editing Bart Ehrman's Gospel of Matthew course, he literally says he was watching a movie. Sorry for the sneak peek. We got to keep hydrated. I'm getting dehydrated. His child was watching a fictional movie with him and said, Dad, is this true? Bart Ehrman says, yes. No, Dad, because they know how their dad is. No, Dad. Did this happen? No, is what Bart said. Huh. Interesting statement by Bart. Is this true? Yes. But did this happen? No. Hmm. Okay. Depends on your definition, the Mr. Zeke or Zek. And I guess if true means what actually happened, literally, then you don't. I mean, it depends, because when you're dealing with history, it's probabilistic. But if you can actually prove something empirically, you don't need belief in that being true. So it's all about definitions. What's for lunch? Kiana, you're killing me. I think I'm probably going to eat some chicken. Sorry, vegans, but I'm probably some rice and chicken. Moses Irfan, forgive me. I was in seminary today, and the topic was inerrancy and infallibility. I asked about the Exodus narrative. The teacher could not clearly defend it. Wow. That's awesome. You're showing up here in the live stream talking about being in seminary today. And it's interesting to notice that the seminarian educator is trying to defend it, at least. But I'm curious to know, are they actually giving you literature from critical scholars to read and learn? Or are they like trying to teach you how to defend against those who say it never happened? Well, how's your seminary? And then I'll go after this one. I'm looking forward to Moses from the Exodus answering the question. Let's see. Tell us a little bit more about your seminary experience right now, if you don't mind, if you can. Pizza sound good, Derek. We had pizza last night. Caesar salad, roast beef. Waiting for Moses to split the Red Sea right now. I'm here, my friend. You might be crafting your comment, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you say. curious because everybody's probably got a different educational experience, different teachers, different seminaries, but it'll be interesting in light of Satan's Guide, the documentary, like what your personal right now in 2024 experience in seminary is at your particular college. Okay. Reformed seminary. I was not given any literature to look back to. I am from Finland. Oh, interesting. So there's no like literature they're giving you where they're making a case that the Exodus is mostly literary. Even the ones who think there's a memory there say it's literary. It's the ones who want it to have happened the way the Bible describes. That's it. Thank you from Finland for that super chat and that comment. Very, very interesting. I love y'all. I am gonna go eat before I like end up on the stream like having a freaking seizure or something because I do need to eat. Thanks a lot for the support, members of the channel, the super chats, the comments, the love, the criticisms, the whole nine. Helps me out, keeps me going, motivated. I like that we're not all agreeing on everything under the sun. That's what makes it fun. And be on the lookout because we got a lot more discussing to do. Anyway, I'm going to do my Huckleberry outro. I think I'm going to do that. Where is the outro? Oh, there it is. Me with the 10 Commandments. I love you, and hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your Huckleberry. That's just my game.